Hello, everybody.
Morning, or whatever day and time it is.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
We got people all over the place calling in.
Yeah, there we go.
Wonderful. Alexis, we get to meet face to face. And Ravi, oh my goodness, all kinds of new and old friends. Depending on how many people we have, we may have you just do a quick say hello and where you're from.
Hello.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon.
And for some people, it's good evening.
Good afternoon. It's the afternoon here.
Hello.
Hello, good morning. Good morning. Good morning here.
Good morning.
Oh, hello.
And good evening from Vienna.
And let's just do this. Well, oh wait, I want to. Oh, we are recording. Okay, good. So let's just go ahead and let me welcome you. There's more people on. I'm Judy Dale. This is a Big Questions webinar that's sponsored by the Flamekeepers Committee, which is the committee of the MSR Executive Committee. And let's just do a really quick hello. Say your name and where you're from. And Tom, can we start with you?
Sure. It's Tom Cullum. I'm in Vancouver. I can only stay till a half an hour. So.
Hi, Greg
And we are
Stephan,
recording.
Los Angeles.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is Ravi Chinta from South Florida.
Welcome.
Mel Tooney, Goshen, Connecticut.
Yeah.
This is Richard from Provence in France, south of France.
Hi, Richard.
This is Alexis from Barcelona.
Glad to have you with us, Alexis.
Yeah.
Good morning, all. Good afternoon, all. Whatever time it is, wherever you are. This is Richard Paraguay from the University of Dallas. Happy New Year to all of you.
Thank you.
Good morning,
Hi,
Mark. I'm sorry.
Good morning.
Good morning. This is Olivia from Los Angeles.
Olivia, it's been so long since I've seen you. I'm glad to see you here.
Yeah, this is really exciting. Thanks for hosting this. Thanks.
I don't have video at work, but this is Matt Shelley calling from Nyack, New York.
Matt, you and I probably go back longer than anybody else that I know in this group. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marla Reed. I'm in Boulder, Colorado.
Hi, Marla. Yeah, we go back pretty long, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Val. I'm calling from Scotland.
Wonderful. Glad to have you with us.
Hi, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm Stacy from Massachusetts at Western New England University.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi.
I'm Kim Davies, and I am in Ontario, Canada.
Welcome, Kim.
Hi, I'm Khadija. I am Khadija from Connecticut, University of New Haven.
Hey, hi.
Hi, Jerry.
Hello, how are you? Yes, hi.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann, and I'm also from Connecticut, like Kadisha.
Wonderful. Nice to see you again.
Good evening from Europe. I'm Ekaterina from Vienna, Austria.
Good to have you with us. Thank you. Charlie, I thought I saw you doing your hand. Charlie, me?
I don't know if you can hear me. I'm using an old computer.
We can hear you.
Okay, and I only have one ear, but happy to listen.
Where are you calling from, Charlie?
Copenhagen, Denmark.
Great. Jennifer, I think you wanted to go.
Yeah, I'm Jennifer Blaylock. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Thank you. Mary Finney?
Yes, I'm Mary Finney, and I'm living in Columbus, Ohio.
Welcome.
Wow, David. May I?
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Regina. I'm calling from Maryland, USA. Although I actually like it, how some person said I'm living in. That was nice.
So glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
And it's a good idea to mute when you're not. I'll get back.
Yes, I'll be.
Okay, I think almost everybody has checked in, so we're going to go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
I'm Gerard Farias. I'm from Madison, New Jersey.
Thank you, Gerard.
And I'll chime in too. I'm Eric Hillman from Vancouver.
Hi, Eric.
Hello, Judy.
David Bogie from New Mexico.
Oh my goodness. Hi, David.
Nice to see you.
Oh, look at you, Khadijah. Hi.
And hello, Denise Frizzell from Durham, North Carolina.
Hello.
And this is Tara, and I'm living in Santa Fe, New Mexico right now. Hello.
Hi, Tara.
Hi, Melissa O'Mara from Tully, New York.
Wonderful. Welcome. Okay. I think there may be others coming in or who haven't introduced themselves, but you are all welcome. We're so delighted that you're here. This is the MSR Flamekeeper's first webinar. We call it the Big Questions webinar. And as I said in our my email, is the founder or leader in the management, spirit, religion, interest. We have been meeting to talk about really our legacy and our vision for founding MSR and our dreams for the future, and also reached out to Chris Laszlo, who's new on the MSR Executive Committee, who we see as one of the many wonderful future leaders of MSR, to have a representative of not just the elders, but the up-and-coming leaders. Let me introduce each of them. So I did mention Chris Laszlo, and we also have Jerry Bieberman and Lee Robin and Richard Paragoy. A person who's not on the call is Yochanan Altman, who's the editor of the JMSR journal, the Journal of Management, Spirituality, and Religion. He sends his regrets, but will be involved in a future webinar if we decide to do that. I sent invitations out to all of the MSR members. I also sent them out to my Edgewalker community, and so I have several of Edgewalker friends and connections on the call too, because I think MSR is very much an Edgewalker group, a group that integrates and walks between worlds. And so it's a delight to have you with us. And I want to open with a quote that I sent at the end of the invitation. I want to start with that as part of our sacred space together, and then a moment of silence. And then we'll move into each of the Flamekeepers sharing their big questions for a minute or two. Then we'll have a little bit of dialogue among the Flamekeepers, and then we'll open it up for anybody else who wants to questions, share thoughts, big questions, just see what emerges. So if you haven't muted, it will help if you mute your phone for now, or your computer. Thank you. And so I will begin with this quote from Angeles Arian. In many shamanic societies, if you came to a shaman or medicine person complaining of being disheartened, dispirited, or depressed, they would ask one of 4 questions. When did you stop dancing? When did you stop singing? When did you stop being enchanted by stories? When did you stop finding comfort in the sweet territory of silence? Where we have stopped dancing, singing, being enchanted by stories, or finding comfort in silence, where we have experienced the loss of soul. Dancing, singing, storytelling, and silence are the 4 universal healing salves. Angeles Arian. Please join me in 30 seconds of silence and of connection to each other. Thank you. And not everyone is, we're hearing some background noise, so you might check to see if you can mute yourself. If not. So I'd now like to invite each of the Flamekeepers to share what's a big question for them that as we, in our discussions in our Flamekeeper committee meetings, we talk about how are we going to nurture the soul of MSR and the purpose and mission of MSR. And these questions keep arising. So let me ask, which Flamekeeper would like to go first? Or maybe it's just easy if I go ahead and appoint someone. Jerry, could I ask you to go first?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I want to say hello to everybody. It's nice to see you all again. Secondly, it's nice to be an elder, I guess. And I don't feel much older, but anyway. And here is my question. My question is, how do our own preconceptions and biases, both positive and negative, influence our choice of research questions that we ask and the ways in which we ask them? Is there a dark side that we want to avoid falling into? And if so, how, what practices, teaching, research methods, etc., can we use to avoid being seduced by the dark side?
Thank you. So go ahead and say a little bit about that for a minute or two.
Expound on the question. Okay. Well, it seems to me that from the discussions that the Flamekeepers had, and just in general, I think it's important that we begin by recognizing our own biases. And some of these biases we don't even know. They could be unconscious, but I think they influence everything we do. And what amongst these is the feelings that we have about spirituality, what are our own preconceptions about spirituality, our own spiritual experiences. I know in my case, I have a tendency, when I hear about something new, sometimes I'll really buy into it and get all excited about it for a while. I don't realize that my wife reminds me that it seems like I'm going around proselytizing people. And then that kind of fades away after a while. But I think that often happens, or could happen, that, you know, when we, you know, it's easy to feel that our experience is the same as everybody else's experience. And so another part of this, I think, is the idea that, you know, everybody wants to get tenured. Well, first we want to get a job, we want to get our degree, then we want to get tenured, and, you know, all those things. And we carry around preconceptions about what we need to do to get tenure. which I think, and this will lead right into, I think, some of, the other questions like Judy's question. If we carry around in our heads preconceptions like only certain things will get us taken, or we don't want to get anybody upset, those things, that could easily influence the way we act. And the third thing I would add is that from looking at the research that I've seen over the years, it's very easy to take a positive, I don't know if positive is even the word, but a lot of the stuff that gets published and that we write tends to be about how spirituality will lead to profits. In other words, how do we use these practices to get more money for a company, which I think might be partly related to the assumption that, okay, that's what you need to get tenure to get published. Or maybe the assumption is just that it's great for companies to make money, but that leaves out a whole bunch of other stakeholders besides just shareholders. So.
Hey, beautiful. Thank you very, very much. Since you mentioned my question, I'll just go ahead and go. My question is, what research methodologies exist beyond the traditional quantitative and qualitative methods? Research methods that are based on expanded levels of consciousness or other ways of knowing, like noetic ways of knowing. And that ties into the whole tenure question, what the mainstream wants, and what the field of MSR, Management, Spirituality, and Religion, offers is the opportunity to expand our consciousness, to expand new ways of doing methodology that are based on evidence, on data, and on other ways of knowing that are currently not acceptable, but that are worth exploring. And it's just, this is like an intuitive sense to me that there's something else out there that we never talk about and don't use, but could. And so that's just a question I live with. Let me ask Lee Robbins to go next. Lee? Oh, there you are. You're muted, Lee. There we go.
Got that. So let me go back to the very beginnings of MSR, actually before MSR in the academy. And at that point, my intention, along with Judy and David Cooper-Ryder and other people, was to look at how we could get corporations to behave better and other businesses, and to put it into a spiritual or religious framework. It comes out of the Buddhist perspective on reducing suffering in the world. So it was very practical kind of, and not one particularly focused on transcendence. Now what I believe we are facing with difficulty over the world, in the United States, but not just in the United States, in the developed world generally, is polarization. And underlying that, I believe, is the narrow interest versus the general interest. So in corporations, to bring it back closer to our area, it's stockholders versus stakeholders. Stakeholders including the workers, the community, the world as a whole. And I believe that this is the central problem in political issues of the day here and abroad, and in the behavior of the primary players in the economic world, namely corporations. So my question is how we can move towards considering that more general interest rather than focusing narrowly. And there's always been a struggle between the two, which I believe, not to go too far afield, goes back to evolutionary issues and how we developed as humans. And I am hopeful that attention to it by corporations is one source of creating less suffering in the world for employees, for...
Lee, one of our participants says she can't hear you and your voice is very slight. Can you either get closer to the mic or speak a little louder?
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
So, yes. The microphone is over here.
Great, thanks.
So my concern is how we can move towards a wider interest. And to just add one other bit about why I believe tribalism has arisen so strongly at the present time, it's the divisions between those who are successful adapters, which probably includes all or most of us, and the left behinds. So the left behinds are then readily susceptible to empty promises by clever marketeers, of which we have leadership in the United States, for example, but in many other places. So it's not just an issue of the United States or that particular leader, who are trusting and who come to believe that we can go back into the way things were. And of course we can't. So that's the general kind of issue that I'm concerned about.
Wonderful. Thank you. So Richard, would you go next? Richard Paraguay?
Surely. The question that I submitted was what practices or wisdom from spiritual and religious traditions could be useful to business students learning how to deal with real-world organizational issues. Let me tell a couple of stories, if you will, about this consideration. I've just returned from 5 weeks in Paradise, otherwise known as Brazil. And while there, I had some very interesting conversations with people who, on the surface, I would never have thought that they were meditators, nor were they spiritual. Because Brazil essentially is, well, where we are from, hedonistic. And I took some time and talked with one individual in particular, and I've known him for a while. I'm very close to his father, but I've known him, and he was talking with me about his meditation practice helps him as the chief executive officer of a company outside of Sao Paulo, which is making highly intricate technical innovations in the way in which you cap oil wells that are deep under the salt in Brazil's waters. And it was fascinating as to the way in which he talked about what was driving him. And he said, essentially, I want this to be where there is absolutely no waste. We want to make sure that these products do not allow for the escape of any fluids or gases that will possibly contaminate the waters or will be deleterious to any of the animal life that's there. And he said, it's one of those things which my guidance is that I want to take this and use it in other areas so that the whole idea naturally is that there is no such thing as waste. And I said, what is that? And he said, well, literally, and he used a statement, literally, I want to be the king of, and I'll let you consider out what that is. But by analogy, you think of it as a cow who does his business, creates methane, then the materials that he deposits are left there and they fertilize the soil and they go up, and everything that that cow has and does is useful. There is no waste. It's the same thing when they slaughter pigs. And there is no waste in a pig. The only thing they don't use is the curl in his tail and the squeal. So this was just one. But the second individual I met for the first time, and he's a man of some years, and we were talking, and he said to me, well, what were you doing when I came up here? And I said, oh, I was meditating. He said, oh, what kind of meditation were you doing? I said, it was a silent meditation. but I was going to move into chakra meditation. And he says, "Oh, I meditate as well. Would you mind if I joined you?" I said, no. So we sat there and we did a 15-minute quiet meditation. And then we started to talk. His work, he said, everything that I do, and he's a financial investor and a very successful. He says, everything that I do, I start with the idea of what is my purpose in mind? How can I take what I'm doing to really make it better for the people that I'm working with and for society as a whole? And these were just two instances. I spent a long time in one of the natural preserves right by the airport. And there, the indication was from the people who were directing this program is that as the airplanes take off, all of their exhaust goes through and it passes over this natural preserve, and all the carbon dioxide is taken out of it, and all the green goes back into oxygen. And they say, we are carbon neutral in this airport. And I said, wow. So I said, how did you get to that? He says, those are instances. And this surprised me no end to find this in Brazil. And I just come back, loaded with ideas, and loaded with the concepts, and loaded with the context, and we're going to continue to explore this. The whole idea of sustainability.
Wonderful. It sounds like you also came back with hope.
Oh, yes, yes.
So it's a perfect segue to Chris Laszlo, who's done some very pioneering work on spirituality and sustainability. So Chris, what is your big question?
Thank you, Judy. And I just want to say how delighted I am to be joining as a relatively recent member this MSR community. I'm learning every day from all of you, and also being great fun somehow to be connected in this group. My big question is, how can leading edge findings in science support emerging MSR findings in organizational practices? In particular, the kind of MSR research and practice findings that have to do with getting business to be force for good. So the question can be thought of in the following bits and pieces. First of all, as many of you know, recent findings in quantum science and consciousness studies, in neuroscience, epigenetics, evolutionary biology, to take just one subset of the new sciences, are really suggesting that the nature of physical reality is an integrated whole, that we live in a world in which we are deeply connected, not just metaphorically, not just like, oh, I feel connected to you, but that we're actually connected by energy and information fields. And of course, the work of E.O. Wilson and many others have suggested that we're also connected through mutualism and cooperation, which it turns out are at least as important in biological systems as sort of survival of the fittest and the dog-eat-dog competition that we were all told about in elementary school. So what's interesting about this view that's emerging from the sciences, particularly quantum sciences, is that it's saying that we live in a world where we're deeply interconnected to one another, a world of wholeness, a world of coherence. And that is exactly what the great religious and spiritual traditions have been telling us for millennia. So again, with this group, you're all aware of these ideas, the Chinese Tao, the Vedantic Brahma, the Buddhist Sunyata, the Zoroastrian Asha, and so on. And the same we can find in Judeo-Christian traditions. So if it's true that we live in a world where we are profoundly connected to one another, and that we have that we are defined by this kind of relationship that we have with others and with nature and with the cosmos, then how does that change the kind of research and practice that we do in MSR? So, one of the things that I think we need to make visible is that there is an ontology behind a lot of MSR research that is still based on an old science of separateness, selfishness, utility maximization, human beings are above nature, and so on. And there's an epistemology as well that is, I think, quite different from what the quantum sciences are saying, with a lot of uncertainty and lack of causality, and the way complex systems work, in which sometimes something and its opposite can also be true, and replicability of results is much more difficult. Not because we don't understand quantum science, but that's because of the nature of quantum phenomena. So one of the questions I have is, how can findings in the natural sciences and in the social sciences, which of course include things like positive organizational scholarship and the work of people like Fredrickson and Cooper Ryder and Jane Dutton and others, Csikszentmihalyi, they have also brought a new perspective to thinking about social phenomena. How are these developments impacting how we should think about MSR research and practice? And I would add perhaps one last piece, and that is that there's also a lot of evidence now that practices such as the one that we had to start this Zoom call, the practice of quiet, stillness, that spiritual and religious traditions have told us have a value of centering us, healing us, connecting us. Science is now beginning to show that that also has a basis that can be shown. So, there's a lot of work to show how when you slow the analytic cognition of the brain, what that does in terms of changing how we experience the world when we reduce the activity of the superior parietal lobe, for example, we experience a greater sense of oneness with others. What the minds of the meditators, that's actually physically changed through their practice of mindfulness. So for me, and I'm just about to finish, so I don't take more time than is my time, but for me, where I find the most exciting elements of inquiry in this is that when I think about the implicit theories of change that exist on how do we get businesses to be more force for good, how do we get business leaders to want to contribute to a better society. We know, because it's been well studied, that there are many theories of change that depend on rational empirical strategies that assume that humans are rational and that they act on self-interest, and that you can just basically show them the return on investment for doing something good, and that if there is an ROI, then they'll do it. Then there's another theory of change which is normative, which is, let's appeal to values and social norms and beliefs. That's also being widely used. And then there's a third theory of change that Chen and Bennett talk about in their 1967 work on general strategies for affecting change in human systems. And that's power coercive strategies. These are strategies where people use sanctions, political and economic sanctions, to force people to change. So, in the literature, as far as I can tell, those are the strategies that have been used. I think there's an opportunity for MSR to use a fourth strategy of change, which I would call direct, intuitive, spiritual. And according to this strategy, we can help leaders and people in organizations and in all walks of life to take on practices like stillness, but actually lots of other practices as well: mindfulness, meditation, listening to music, gardening, exercise, and many, many other exercises that give people an experience of wholeness and connectedness, and that change them at the level of being. So you're not changing them analytically by convincing them that something should be done because there's a self-interest thing. You're actually transforming them at the level of consciousness, which is, a way to loop back to what Judy Neal was talking about. And I think the science and the work in spirituality and religion are converging to make the case for this fourth approach to engaging people to change, to create a better world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Wow, I love everything you're saying. And it makes me think of a couple of people that are on this call. And this is a little bit out of what I had planned to do, which is open this up to everyone. But first, I think there's a couple of people on this call I'd like to comment on some things they've heard. One of them is a businessman who now develops leaders to develop other leaders, and that's Mel Toomey. And the other is a scholar and person who's created conscious leadership and transcendent leadership kinds of education, and that's Greg Stebbins. So can I invite you, Mel, first to respond to anything that you've heard, and then I'll have Greg do that, and then we'll open it up to everyone. And I can unmute you if you need that, Mel. I think I can. There you go. Mel, you're unmuted.
Thank you. I often ask those I have the opportunity to work with to listen to conversations from a perspective of, if you understand what's being said, you're not listening. Frankly, I'm left with a dose of my own medicine right now. I've got a lot to ponder and comprehend before I can come to any understanding about what I heard today. But I'm moved by it.
Yeah, Mel, I'm thinking particularly of in your Master of Arts in Organizational Leadership program, kind of building on what Chris was saying about working with leaders and how you not only provide them intellectual and experiential learning, you do provide different forms of contemplative practice and encourage them to take on meditation and that more holistic approach to leadership development.
Yes. The opportunity that's there for them is, and you call it out in many forms, it is that, what are the unquestioned answers you're operating through? And that the ones that are taken for granted and out of the field of questioning.
Thank you. Turn it over to Greg.
First of all, Chris, thank you for bringing forward such a comprehensive list of topics. I found it intriguing. I think it's very clear that science is beginning to catch up and in some ways become the cutting edge of awareness, if you will. One of the things that I'm finding is that many of the new practices, mindfulness, emotional intelligence, etc., has become a gateway for leaders, and most of my work is with business leaders, to start doing an inner journey and finding out more about who they are inside, and where people used to cross their fingers and say, no, not me. I'm finding a significant amount of openness, and this is especially true with younger leaders who just, I was talking with one of them, and she said that her concept of what has generally been referred to as cults. In her generation, people go, ooh, which one are you a part of? So it really changed the dialogue of what we were talking about in terms of her spiritual practice and where she wanted to go. So I think the wide variety of opportunities for self-exploration, no matter which topic or which technique you use, is becoming a main force in the business world. It's not the commanding force at this point, but I think that's what the MSR group could really be doing to assist people. And maybe it's through research, maybe it's through, as Chris says, a new form of change, etc. But it's, for me, it's exciting times out there. Conversations I've had with a select number of people 20 years ago now are more common in the leadership people that I speak with. So certainly anything that we can do to help them get grounded in the meditative or contemplative state so they can have a more clear experience of who they are inside is really going to be assistant. And I think that as soon as they realize that, wait a minute, I'm connected to everybody and there really is no such thing as the other, that automatically brings in a consciousness of what's the highest good for everybody concerned. So we can get them to at least contemplate that as a way of doing business. I think you'd see some radical changes in some of the practices that are currently polluting the planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. So we've heard the Flamekeepers talk about 5 different big questions, and I think they're all interconnected, but there's a question of bias and our mindset in our research and our teaching. There's a question about other kinds of methods that we're not using that would build on the quantitative and qualitative but go beyond that. There's a question about the wisdom tradition practices of different spiritual and religious traditions and how we bring that more in our teaching and leadership development. A question about the polarity and how can MSR help the polarity that's existing not only in organizations but in the world to expand our reach. And then a question about the use of science and consciousness. So I want to open it up for the next 15 minutes for anybody who'd like to make comments, ask one of the Flamekeepers a question, share your own big question. It's just open, free exploration. So all you need to do is unmute yourself and begin talking. I won't call on people because there's 2 screens and I can't see everybody. So just go for it.
So I'd like to follow up briefly on the discussion, because I think, again, it's a connection between the narrow interest and the wider interest. And so what people have been talking about at the moment, Chris and Greg, for example, is that if we truly understand our nature, there is no difference. And so the overly narrow focus is a misunderstanding of the nature of our being. And to connect it to a particular research issue that has long troubled me and is probably not so common in MSR research, but is still common.
And again, can you speak a little louder, Lee?
Oh, yes, but it's still common in other areas. The fundamental basis of research is we look at different treatments for organizations, do it this way or do it that way, and then what do? We decide which one is more successful. So the critical issue there is what is meant by success. And when success is simply defined by which is more profitable, for example, or which creates a higher stock price, then that moves to the narrower interest. And that is, I think, a fundamental problem in much of the research, which perhaps some of us can address.
Yeah, real desire to be accepted by the mainstream versus the desire to push the boundaries and understandings of knowledge and consciousness. Thank you. Who else would like to contribute to the conversation?
I have can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
And then David.
Oh, hi. Hi, David.
Hi.
I had a reaction to some of the discussion so far. It has to do with change. When Chris was mentioning different change theories, it reminded me of change theories that I hadn't thought about for a while, but back in the 50s and 60s with the Tea Group movement and the whole idea of, you mentioned Bennis and Shepard and the change model, that in order to create change, the whole idea of Tea Groups was that to create change, you created a lot of tension, and the tension led to to reducing the defenses. So as the defense mechanisms went down, it created the opportunity for people to change if they wanted to change, which leads to my other point, which is a question of, I've heard several people talking about getting people to change. How do we change somebody? How do we make them change? The alternate way to look at this is a person only changes if they want to change. And it also gets back to my original question is, it seems to be one of our biases that we need to change people. We need to change companies, we need to change leaders, we need to change the world. And that reminds me of John Lennon saying, yeah, we all want to change the world, but do we need to have a revolution? So it just raises the question of, again, do we really want to change people, or do we want to create conditions where people might want to change? So that's one question. And the other point to this is, maybe given all the current tensions in the world, maybe one positive view is things are getting so bad that people will want to change on their own without us forcing it.
I have a comment. Oh,
David Boji, but I'll wait my turn.
yeah.
It
Hi.
was your turn, David.
Hi.
It was David's turn, and then whoever has a comment, I can't see, can go next.
Olivia. Yeah.
Oh, okay, Olivia, you can follow David. Don't lose yourself. Go ahead.
Okay. So, as you know, I believe in storytelling research, and it's really important, I think, to include non-Indigenous ways of knowing in storytelling, like Linda Tue Smith and the whole Kaupapa Maori movement in New Zealand. And New Zealand has declared a river a living being, not just a legal being, but a spiritual being. And I believe that that's a step forward. But we need to really deconstruct the storytelling. For example, I'm looking at the 2017-18 sustainability report of Coca-Cola, and they claim to be doing really good things with women's economic empowerment. They claim to be putting back as much water in the earth as they're taking out, which seems a rather outlandish claim if you think about the farmers in India and people around the world that are in water scarcity. So I think there needs to be positivity reinforced for the changes that Coca-Cola, Pepsi, the whole water barons they're making around the world. But then there needs to be real science that says the whole world has less and less fresh water. Less than 0.5% of water is fresh, drinkable, clean. Much of it is unsanitary. 4 billion people now are in water scarcity. That's now. The UN reports underestimated. Anyway, so that's my comment. More storytelling research that brings in nature and some reality in the storytelling of companies like Coca-Cola.
Thank you, David. I love the idea of the river being a living being.
Thank you.
Olivia, you had a comment.
Yeah, I really appreciate these questions, and there's things I've struggled with, as you probably know, Judy, for years. And some of the patterns I've seen, and I'd love to get thoughts about it, especially in new ways of knowing, is that I come from the data world, and in my experience, I just saw that as data and technology got faster and faster, it created more stress in the system, which then through research and using some of Chris Laszlo, your writing, is that we really need to value people more as a way of making businesses work better. So that sort of argues for the, we can convince leaders that they'll make more money if they treat people better. So that's just something I've seen in my research. And the other thing I see too is that I think our consciousness is evolving to the degree that the younger people naturally want more connectedness, or they feel it, and they want to raise all boats and lead more by group than individually. The old fear-based leadership model, it just doesn't work anymore. It's not efficient enough. And I think the younger people resonate with that more. And then that led me to this big question, which is, what is it that leaders need to do to be able to lead more of as a coach and an empowerment person? And I think there's a lot of wounded leaders out there. So I just want to throw out those thoughts and a question about how do we get to these leaders that are wounded and don't want to give up the control or think of themselves as separate, and so need to hang on to their power and their wealth. Thanks.
Thank you, Olivia. And that kind of goes back to Jerry's second comment about how, do we ask how we change people, or do we ask how do we create the conditions that allow them to want to change naturally? So those are really big questions.
Yeah.
And then what's our role as coaches, consultants, faculty, researchers, human beings, spiritual beings? What's our role in all? Who'd like to go next?
Me? Can I?
Okay, Alexis, please.
Yeah, I just want to share something about polarity, because here in Europe, we're having the Brexit problem. And also in my surrounding in Barcelona, we're going for the Catalan independence against Spain. And I don't want to talk about politics, but I just want to share that I agree on the subject that Lee is pointing out, that polarity is one of the biggest problems we are having. And I'm remembering a professor who was in Santa Barbara University. He was from Catalonia. He's called Raymond Paniker. And he was talking about breaking dialectics and getting religion together. And he had an Hindu father born in Barcelona. And when he went to India, he said, I went Catholic, I felt Hindu, and I came back Buddhist. And he was a very wise man who, when you ask about what was the solution for this change we are talking about, he talked about ecosophy, related to the wisdom of nature, not ecology, that he said that is business as usual. But if we learn to feel the nature as a whole thing, maybe we'll go over these dialectics of one against the other, no? And I'm also related to storytelling, and I also agree that one of the main practices could be also related to young people to use modern storytelling, no? And how storytelling gets to nature and change people, no? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And how about storytelling in nature?
Well, this is a kind of a meditation where one can do, no? And try to write, listening to the nature, like the romantic writers or painters did long ago, no? Right. And also the Zen poetry writers, no? That's not new. Yeah.
Most of our development of leaders, our teaching, our research is all done in cement, glass, and steel buildings.
Yeah, that's right.
Which, it takes a little bit of imagination. Those are part of nature too, but there's just something easier about being out under a tree or having your feet on the earth or being next to the ocean. And more in tune, more at one with parts of nature and ourselves. So thank you.
Yeah.
So we have time for one more contribution, and then I'm going to turn it back to the Flamekeepers.
I just had a clarification on a word Alexis used. Did I hear ecosophy?
Yeah, that was his term. Yeah.
Okay. How do you spell that?
Like the Greek Sophia. Sophia is wisdom in Greek. So eco wisdom would be in Anglo-Saxon, no? Ecosophy is Ecosophia, ecosofia in Spanish.
Thank you. Go ahead, Gerard, you wanted to say something? Oh, you're muted.
No, I turned it on now. I kind of feeling schizophrenic right now, in the sense that when I hear these conversations, I feel hopeful. But when I look outside and look like the recent IPCC report, the Stockholm Resilience Center reports, etc., which are calling for a tremendous sense of urgency. And I don't know whether we have the wherewithal to like halving greenhouse gases in the next 10 years or 12 years, eliminating them completely by 2050. These kinds of warnings, and in some senses, the big question is the context. We might talk a lot about it from a micro perspective, but the context is something that is an extremely powerful force. And so how do we connect these two together? I mean, maximization of shareholder wealth is still, and will be, it seems to me, for a long time, the predominant model that we will continue to witness. In fact, it seems to be going more and more in that direction. So in some senses, I just wonder, how do we connect these together? Because while we, I think, need to adopt a positive and an optimistic kind of perspective, we should not lose our sense of reality of what we're really dealing with.
Just to add a brief comment related to that. So this is something that I've been concerned about, and I believe that the underlying problem, though not so easy to solve, is the legal structure of corporations, which gives the entire ultimate power, though as we know as researchers that there are deviations from it, but it gives the entire power to the owners of the capital, the owners of the shares of stock. And I would point out that in Germany, which is indeed a very successful, productive capitalist economy, they have engaged in significant deviation from that, in which a substantial share, I believe it's about a third of the seats on the board, which are the controllers, are given to the unions and other places. There's a lot of research to be done around that, and which has been done on it, on whether it's successful, but there are approaches to responding to that problem.
Yeah, just in the legal structure, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Lynn Stout, who's talked about the notion of maximization of shareholder wealth not being embodied in the law. It is not a fiduciary responsibility of managers, but we have managed to construct a perspective that makes it seem that it's embodied in the law. So there's a lot about interpretation there too that I think we need to pay attention to, and how, to what extent do we in business schools, in particular, I'm talking about as academicians here, perpetuate that kind of notion, even when we know that it's different and there are different perspectives out there.
And just one more brief response to that. Before I went into management, I was an economist. I'm now a recovering economist. And I believe a fundamental problem, at least in classical economics as I knew it, is the very limited attention paid to interdependence, which are described and are mentioned as external economies and diseconomies. And when we were living in the forests with 10 miles between every human site, not paying much attention to that was fine. But the world is very different now. And the external economies and diseconomies are actually central. And that's what requires us to pay more attention to this.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if, I'm sorry, I wonder, Judy, if there's a way that these big questions, if people, there are a number of people perhaps on this list that don't normally talk to each other or have a chance to explore what kinds of things they're doing or they're aware of, or ways forward in terms of choices that they and others may want to be making together. I'm just wondering if there's a way that the flame keepers that led this meeting might each have another call that just invites anyone who wants to come into it, so that more of those who are participants on this have a chance to share more and get to know each other more and build a stronger connection of concern in terms of not just those questions, but what it lifts up for them, what it lifts up for the participants.
That's a beautiful, am I muted? Oh, hold on. Okay, I'm not muted. Mary, that's a beautiful idea. You've also offered some other ideas about big questions in research, big questions in teaching, and so on. So I think the next step is the flame keepers at our next committee. Well, one of the things we wanted to see was there energy for this kind of conversation? And the answer clearly is yes. And so we will brainstorm different ideas. We'll also run them by the MSR Executive Committee to see what we might do next to continue this conversation. And so one idea would be, say, Jerry to ask his question and have one whole big question webinar on Jerry's question. So that might be one way to approach it. That's a great idea. So we'll explore that and come back to you. And then we do need to wrap this up in the interest of time. And Ravi, I'm so sorry. You've been writing a lot on the side. I hope people will read that. I'm going to capture all of this, the recording and the chat on the side. But we do need to wrap up because I want to keep my commitment to you. So I'm going to ask each of the flame keepers to make like a 1-sentence summary statement. And then we'll close with a moment of silence, and we'll be back to you with what's next. So let's start in the same order I went before. Jerry, would you give your wrap-up sentence for us?
Okay, 1 sentence. Well, I was thinking of the song, the Logical Song, which was, I forget who recorded it, but the song was that when I was young, the birds and the trees used to talk to me, and then as I got older, I was taught to be a vegetable and logical. And from the discussion I've heard, I think it's time to reconnect the two. Like, for example, what are the trees telling us? What is the birds telling us? Which also reminds me of combining science with mysticism. I mean, really, if we're really talking about holistic, then I think that most of the scientific ideas started with theories that came from some kind of a mystical origin. That's it.
Wonderful, thank you. Lee? You're muted, Lee.
Seems to me a central point here that we've been discussing is that the individual interest must include the general interest. Or I would quote the saying attributed, probably inaccurately, but attributed to Patrick Henry: we will all hang together or we will all hang separately.
Thank you. I just want to note that Mary Finney has asked in the chat if you would leave your email so you can get future notices about what's going on. So I see people are doing that. And I'll leave this up. I won't close it down. So when we close our conversation, you can still add email. And I'll continue to use the email channel used to keep you up to date. Richard, you're muted. Let me unmute you. There you go.
Thank you. One dominant thought arises as I listen very carefully to some very intelligent people with good ideas. And that is, in my teaching practice, what is going to be emphasized through this year 2019 is the idea of practice, practice, practice. enough to think about these things, one needs to take action. So I'm going to introduce more of the project work and say straight how spirituality has impacted what it is that you saw before and what it is now. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chris Laszlo? Chris, are you muted? I don't see Chris. So Chris may have had to leave us. I don't see him. So I guess that I will go ahead and close us and say thank you so much, first of all, to the Flamekeepers for the deep conversations we've had coming into this and for your desire to open up the conversation to a much larger group of people. Hopefully it can expand outward. And thank you to those of you who said, yes, I can show up today. And to those of you who are watching the recording who couldn't come but wanted to be involved, we embrace you and hold you in the energy of this circle. The conversation will continue. And I'd like to just end with a moment of silence. 30 seconds, and we'll end our time together this time. Thank you, everyone. And if you haven't put your email, and if you want to put it on the sidebar in the chat, please do. We still have other ways to connect you, but by having that,
being the source of the contact. Okay, so I'm going to leave it open, but I'm going to say goodbye.
Judy, do you hear me?
Can't hear you, Mary. It looks like you're talking, but I can't hear you.
I could hear Mary.
Oh, hi, Richard. I was just going to tell Judy that as soon as she somehow,
There we go. It's my fault I can't hear you. My computer did something funny. Okay, go ahead, Mary.
Oh, just at the very end, when you came and said those last words, your voice became very clear and strong. But there was something that was just making it a little bit, I don't know if it was I don't know if you touched something on your computer or what it was exactly, but all of a sudden it became even stronger. And it was, I thought maybe it would become a little bit stronger if everybody had muted. And maybe that's what happened. I'm not exactly sure. What happened.
Muted throughout.
Yeah. At any rate, I don't know how to
problem
solve all this technology, but at any rate, we could hear you for sure. But it was a little bit clearer, as it always is, and when in the past too. So.
It's good feedback. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else need to put their email in? I think we got everybody. Because if we're done, I'll go ahead and end the recording and close out this meeting. Thank you again for being here, and thank you, Flame Keepers.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to all of you. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Nice seeing everyone again.